Today we're going to start by introducing the section on alliances and then later move in to global strategies. As you look at the reasons people do strategic alliances on this list, you're going to see many of them look very similar to the reasons that motivate people to do M&As. Ideas like learning, entering new markets, gaining access to new capabilities, all those are things that are typical with an M&A. However, you see some facets of the alliance that are different than an M&A. The idea of, for example, sharing risks. M&A is all about bringing all the risk inside your firm. With alliances, you can actually try to share the risk. And I'm going to make several references to Boeing's arrangement to build the 787 throughout these series, and you're going to see that this was one of the things Boeing tried to do, was spread the development risk between itself and companies, large companies that it was using as partners in the airplane. You also see that one reason companies sometimes use alliances is they're actually trying to go back to their core competencies and stop doing the things that are on their periphery, and they accomplish those things that they used to do and decided to outsource via alliances. So in many cases, what an alliance is about is trying to capture the benefits of a typical M&A move, but without the costs. And if we want to put it in a human metaphor, an alliance is like becoming engaged to somebody, but not yet married. So you're similar in many ways, but you haven't taken that ultimate step of commitment. So one of the ways that you can see some of these differences and the advantages potentially of an M&A is to compare the downsides of M&As and then look at how an alliance is different. So alliances give you a chance to break off the engagement, so to speak, short of the marriage. So it's easier to unwind because you're not having to separate two entities that have been joined. You don't have to pay the acquisition premium because nobody has bought anybody else, so there's not been this hostile takeover move. So it should have been friendly throughout. And even though we'll talk about later on, you do have to pay attention to cultural clashes because it's less than a complete overlap between the organizations. You can perhaps manage different cultures more successfully than if you were trying to unite them in an M&A. So what you see a lot of companies doing is to get the good things of M&As without some of the downsides of M&As. But we'll talk about sometimes what you don't get with an alliance. So as we try to understand alliances, sometimes people get hung up on, well, is this an alliance or not, and how does that matter? And so I think these two axes that are on this chart make things very clear. We tend to see it as an alliance when there is some sort of time commitment in contract length or some sort of financial equipment in terms of asking them to invest in capability or us giving them money to invest in capability. And so as either our time commitment and or our financial commitment goes up, then we view it as a increasingly stronger, defined as more committed alliance. So down in the bottom corner are contracts. And you could say, well, if it's a very transactional thing, I need 1 million screws to put this thing together, so I'm going to go to a screw seller and buy 1 million screws by a contract. That probably falls short of an alliance. When you go to a screw manufacturer and you ask them to make a specific kind of screw that maybe they're going to have to procure a new type of equipment to do, and they ask you to sign a longer term contract to help them offset that acquisition cost, now you would be talking about an alliance. And so as you go up the time commitment, for example, if you outsource something where you maybe don't have a lot of financial commitment in it, but in that outsourcing move, they may ask you to make a longer term commitment via the contract, or just by virtue of the capability you're losing, you realize it would take me longer to bring that back in house. So mentally, you know, I'm really taking a very dramatic step here. And then as the financial commitment, obviously, as you put more money into it. So where you start to see this kind of mixture of elevated levels of time commitment and financial commitment, you see it in a marketing alliance where you're basically saying, we're going to use your part, and you're going to be, and the fact that your part is in our company, and we're going to jointly market that. The best example of that is for years what Intel did with the leading PC manufacturers, how they had the Intel Inside, and you saw Intel Inside on the boxes, and they advertised and they participated in the advertising campaigns. Same thing with Microsoft. You still see that in the alliance that is becoming overcome with Microsoft's acquisition of Nokia's mobile phone business. But when Nokia adopted the Windows mobile software as its main phone platform, Microsoft backed that up with a lot of money to promote that phone. And then as you increase your time commitment, and especially financial commitment, now you begin to share equity or create new entities called joint ventures. And you obviously, because you do have money put into them, you've gone to a lot of work to set them up, you expect them to run for a decent amount of time. Here's a couple of final introductory thoughts. So it's not just one way to scope the alliance is based on the time and the financial commitment. The other way to look at it is, with who is the alliance? So horizontal, these means that you're allying with potential competitors or complementers, for example, as opposed to a vertical alliance where you're moving somewhere in your supply chain. You're contracting with your suppliers or potentially even with your buyers to have an arrangement with them. Believe it or not, franchising, I think, is a form of a strategic alliance. We don't have a lot of time in this class to talk about franchising, but you have two entities, the franchisor, the franchisee, and they have a similar goal. They're both trying to make money. Then we talk about the cross-border alliance. Again, this simply indicates that you got folks from multiple political units that are participating in it, China, US, whatever. And then the idea of networks, where you are in an alliance with more than one party. There are many parties to this alliance, and I'll give you an illustration of those. So with this brief introduction to alliances, I'm going to stop the video, allow you to catch your breath, and then we're going to step into talking about some specific examples of all these in the next presentation. Catch you in a minute.